So I'd like to thank you for coming out on a windy Monday afternoon. Way better than rain, but not ideal. Um, this is the one of the stops. I believe it's number 5 or 6 for the home run tour for Julian. I am super, super, super grateful for John and Gabriel Shipton to be joining us. For those who don't know, it's Julian Assange's father and brother. People that have toured both Australia, the United Kingdom, and out here in the U.S. building support for their son and brother, respectively. I'm an organizer with a group called Action for Assange. One of my cohorts, Misty, is behind me there. We'll have another one joining us shortly.
Scoot up a little bit, Misty.
Scoot
This
up.
is a group we set out 2 years ago
Yeah, it
to
should be a little better on the sound.
create a social movement demanding that Julian be set free.
Is that better?
When Julian was
Yes.
trafficked out of the Ecuadorian embassy to Belmarsh prison, it was a rally cry for the people that are politically aware around the world. Whether you are Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Independent, Green Party, Socialist, Capitalist, what have you, having the ability to share and expose accurate information, having the ability to hold people accountable for crimes against humanity, let alone general crimes. It doesn't matter what political party that's a part of. It doesn't matter what ideological affiliation you have. Those are very basic core principles. And Julian Assange is someone that stood up for those and stood up for them very valiantly. He went as far as to say in a speech, I believe in 2011, shortly before he was taken into the embassy, that all political ideologies are bankrupt to a greater or lesser extent. And this isn't because their ideals are good or bad. It's because none of us have access to the information to make informed choices about the world we live in. I'm turning 30 in a couple weeks, end of June. When I was in 5th grade, I watched 9/11 happen on the television. And I watched the world change around me with absolutely no idea about anything. I have 2 young children of my own now that have grown up for the last year under what we're being told is a global pandemic. For better or worse, for whatever you believe we're going through or whatever you believe it is not, largely I think those things are irrelevant because we're faced again with a situation where we do not have enough information to make accurate decisions about our world. And one of the things that a gentleman by the name of Ray McGovern, a whistleblower that helped expose the crimes of the Bush-era government, one of the things he always asks at every major world event is, what would WikiLeaks show us? What would WikiLeaks tell us about the situation in the world that we're living under that's called COVID-19 right now? And I just always thought that that was an interesting question. He goes as far back as to ask what would WikiLeaks have published about 9/11? And would the view of our world be different if we had a WikiLeaks at that time and in that moment? So I wanna just kind of run through the last 2 years, what Julian's gone through, and just what's been happening to him and in his case, because there's so much going on across this planet that trying to focus your efforts and attention on following the court case of one man thousands of miles away seems almost irrelevant when the world's burning the way that it is. April 11th, 2019, Julian Assange was taken out of the Ecuadorian embassy. This came about 12 hours after the International Monetary Fund released a loan of $4.2 billion to the nation of Ecuador on behalf of the U.S. and the U.K. Shortly thereafter, Lenin Moreno illegally removed Julian Assange's citizenship and political asylum. British police stormed the embassy in a military fashion and removed Julian out of it. As he was coming out, he was holding a book and screaming. That's not ever the image I expected to see. And I feel like a lot of people feel that exact same way. Fast forward a little bit to January, February of 2020, Julian had spent almost a year in jail before his first actual trial had started. Not the evidentiary hearing of his extradition, but simply a week-long, hey, this is what's about to happen hearing. Following that, in the end of March, Julian Assange was denied access to his lawyers for 6 months while in Belmarsh prison until September of 2020 when the evidentiary hearing against him started. 6 months without being able to speak with an attorney. 6 months without being able to talk to your loved ones. 6 months without being able to see your kids. Locked in a maximum security prison where the only means of communication with the outside is through a video monitor where you don't even know if the person that you're talking to is real. He has no private conversations with his attorneys at all. Every conversation he has is videotaped, filmed, done through a computer monitor where he looks at his attorney through the other side. We found out that leading up to the arrest in April 2019 that there was this company called UC Global, a global intelligence company, a private security firm, as they name themselves, that was tasked with protecting the Ecuadorian government in the embassy in the UK. Sheldon Adelson, David Morales, they turned to the dark side, right? That's what David's emails say about UC Global. They started spying on Julian constantly, installing microphones as far as the women's bathroom. In a feat of pure dystopia, Julian Assange brought out a white noise machine to interrupt and allow him to have privileged legal conversations with his attorneys. In response, the CIA and UC Global installed laser microphones on the windows, so that way they could listen in, even in the event that Julian brought out his white noise machine. I don't know, well, I do know what world we're living in, but I am freaking ashamed that any government that takes money from me would install a laser microphone to get around a white noise machine that got around the microphones that were illegally installed in an embassy in the UK to spy on an Australian citizen that exposed the crimes of the American government. And I've spent the last 30 years of my life seeing absolutely no accountability. I saw us get lied into wars. I saw us hide war crimes. I saw collateral murder. And that was one of the first things at my age of 19 that shook me awake. That said, there's something seriously wrong with the way the world is portrayed, with the way that we see it, with the way that we're told. We had embedded war correspondents throughout all of our media during the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan that brought us this rosy picture of American liberation, but did nothing to show us of the crimes against humanity, of the children that were killed in war, of the parents that died trying to save them. Right? Collateral murder, one simple video, I think about 5 to 6 minutes long, broke open the floodgates of people understanding what our military is actually about. Never before had people seen U.S. troops circle around and kill journalists, and never before had people been exposed to the illegal rule of engagement called a double tap, where the U.S. military at the time, under the direction of John Bolton and George W. Bush, not only would kill insurgents, literally people living their lives in their homes walking down the street, but then they would turn around with that helicopter that was miles and miles away, and they would kill the first responders, the people in the ambulances, the dad that showed up with his 2 kids on the way to school. And you hear the U.S. troops laughing. And there's a term that Julian actually said that he no longer considers a good word, and that is nice. And for those of you who can remember collateral murder from 20 years ago, that's because when the helicopter was circling around, they said, "Look at all those dead bastards." There was a moment of radio silence, and an American soldier said, "Nice." I don't think there's anything nice about killing innocent people in the street. I don't think there's anything nice about gunning down journalists in the street. And I especially don't think there's anything nice about circling back around, murdering a father while 2 young children sit in a car on their way to school. I don't think there's anything nice about military commanders saying, "Don't worry about those kids," because there will come a time when it is our children. We openly have a media talking about the use of drones domestically to carve out political insurrection. We live in an extremely uncomfortable time. And so I am eternally grateful that Gabriel and John are joining us here. We've been organizing tirelessly for 2 years. On April 11th, we had over 50 events in 34 countries on 5 continents across the world. Currently in Germany, I want to say there's 7 events that happen weekly. In the UK, there's at least 1. There's one that happens every 2 weeks in Boston, and it is growing. We have the ship-ins going across the country, stopping at almost, or maybe over a dozen cities, pushing 20 on their way, circling through DC twice. and leaving shortly before Julian's birthday. So the challenge that I'd like to put out to everyone here, everyone watching, do not let the 3rd of July come to pass. Because these empirical bastards, they've done something wonderful for us. They actually hold a celebration for Julian's birthday just a day late. It's called the 4th of July. It's when all of us come together to celebrate our liberty. It's when we say, fuck you to tyrannical bastards. So what I ask everyone here, when we leave this space and go back to our own homes and our own cities and communities, find your community's 4th of July event and take it over. Because that is the day after Julian's birthday, but the day that our rights were supposedly born. Right? And I'm not a fan of propaganda, right? And a lot of what we're told and taught here in the United States is just that. But if they want to build a goddamn holiday about celebrating our ability to expose corruption, I say we use that to the fullest extent. So with that, I am honored to have the Shiftons here with us. I'm not sure who would like to come up first. We didn't really arrange anything. But if John or Gabriel would like to come up to speak next.
Hi everyone, thank you for having us here. Thank you for that. Very well done. Can't believe you remember all that stuff. It's like reliving it all. It's a bit painful. It was interesting about that white noise jammer. I think that was originally installed by the Ecuadorians because they knew they were being spied on as well. And Julian just used it in the embassy too. So John and I are traveling across the US. We're doing a total of, I think, 17 stops. We've done, this is our 4th, so 12 more to go. We'll doing a bit of the Midwest now, then we'll head to the West Coast, and then we'll sort of finish up back in Washington DC, where we've just come from. It's been just incredible, the response that we've had, across the country. When we started out in Miami, and then Boston, and then New York events. Sort of they had to expand the tickets 3 times over to welcome more and more people that came. And then yesterday we had another sort of sold out event in DC. So it's really amazing just to see all the people coming out and everyone getting together again and sort of just getting focused again and getting more people on board, more people talking together. I think we're sort of seeing the momentum building from what we're doing already with more media and things like that. One interesting thing that's happening at the moment, I don't know if you've all seen this, but Merrick Garland is speaking to the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN today about the DOJ and how they've been using subpoenas against journalists to find out sources and things like that. So what we've been asking people to do is to get up in the comments of the New York Post and the the New York Times and the Washington Post, and just let them know that you care about what's happening with Julian Assange and that the Espionage Act has been used against a publisher, and that they should be bringing that up with Merrick Garland as well. What else was I going to tell you? I can tell you, back at the beginning of January, Julian won his extradition case. That was around the 3rd of January, and then he won on health grounds. The judge there basically, found that extraditing to the US would basically be a sentence, a sentence to death. A few days later, the judge, in a sort of in a sick move, refused his bail, so he was sent back to the maximum security prison at Belmarsh, which is where they have the baddest, most violent prisoners in the UK. And he was sent back there, and it's been just over 6 months now since the US government signalled that they would appeal the extradition rejection, and we still don't know whether the appeal will be held or when it will be held. So Julian has been sitting in the Belmarsh prison, which has been COVID lockdown. There's no visitors since October, so he hasn't been able to see his family, his lawyers, for over 6 months. And yeah, it's just it's just heartbreaking to see your loved one just locked in a prison sort of indefinitely without any sort of any sort of sentence or time when they can be released. When I did go and visit him in October, it is you do get a real sense that the other family members visiting their loved ones. I don't know if anyone's ever had a relative in prison, but usually they have a release date and or parole or when they get good behaviour or something like that. So they're always planning or looking forward to doing something, or having a welcome home party, or making what are we going to do for the future, or things like that. But with Julian, we can't actually do any of that. There is no real end in sight for Julian. This is sort of part of the punishment by process that has been levelled against Julian over the years. It's just a sort of continuation of the last coming up on 12 years now since he was under house arrest and then in the embassy for 7 years. But I think we're sort of still, I think coming here and seeing everyone coming out and the hospitality that we've received is just really given us a lot of hope. And I think we saw Reality Winner released today on good behaviour, which is another really signal, something that we can look to as a signal that there might be hope for Julian. With this new DOJ. Something else I want to talk about, and that I think is, particularly with the State Department under the Biden administration trying to re-engage with the world, is Julian has become, whenever authoritarian states around the world are confronted, by this new administration, by the State Department, over human rights or press freedoms, the standard response is now becoming, what about Julian Assange? So we've seen that, with Aliyev, the Azerbaijani authoritarian leader who has a horrendous record of jailing and torturing journalists in his country. He's actually a US sort of ally in the war on terror as well. He was asked by a BBC journalist, about his record on press freedoms, and he turned around and said, how can you lecture me on press freedoms when you've got Julian Assange locked in a prison in your country? We also saw the UK ambassador, the Russian ambassador to the UK, when he was asked about Navalny, what's your country? Why has your country got Navalny in prison? He turned around and said, well, Navalny, we've actually charged him and he's sentenced, but you're holding Julian Assange with no sentence on remand, so you can't lecture us about what we're doing. There's one more as well. So the Chinese Foreign Affairs spokesperson, the State Department loves to talk about Chinese human rights and Chinese press freedom, which is not a comment on it, but they, when they were confronted about it on press freedoms, they responded, what about Assange? Well, look, you're lecturing us on press freedoms, but you have a publisher locked in a maximum security prison in England, charged under espionage charges, and what we've seen recently, a couple of weeks ago, was an Australian journalist in China who is now charged with espionage charges. So it's this sort of, I think the State Department is coming up against this more and more, and they're going to find this prosecution of a publisher under the Espionage Act more and more challenging, more and more embarrassing, and I think what we're doing here can really help them to get out of this mess. Right, well, that's it for now. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. There's on this wandering the world, uh, trying to bring about Julian's. Well, I'm not going to say try, bringing about Julian's release from jail. There's a couple of familiar faces here. There's Taylor Hudak. Every day for 3 weeks, I bumped into Taylor outside the court in where is it? In the Old Bailey in London. What to do and what to say. There's only one road to freedom, and that's knowledge. That's the only road to freedom. And as you see, the first speaker outlined knowledgeably the circumstance of the oppression and intimidation of a journalist. Gabrielle put some warm family details into that circumstances that Julian's experienced these 12 years. That knowledge, the warmth and emotion with detail, and the intellectual content of the first speaker brings freedom. You can see and feel within yourself that that freedom arrives immediately. You know the circumstances. You know what states are involved, the Swedish, the UK. I'll change that. You know what states are involved, the Swedish Prosecuting Authority, the UK Crown Prosecuting Service, and the Department of Justice in the United States. When it was decided to drag Julian out of the embassy, the 12 senators wrote to Lenin Moreno. He was the president of Ecuador. They wrote to him and said, this is not good what you're doing. Then Mike Pence went down and had a chat with him. Mike Pence is a Christian evangelicalist, as is Pompeo. The organising group for the attempt to extradite Julian Assange under the 1917 Espionage Act was organised by those people. Mike Pence, Mike Pompeo, and a man named William Barr. William Barr, under the Bush the First, had a nickname, the Snatcher, because he was capable, determined, and willing to use the extradition treaties of the United States to kidnap judicially from around the world anybody that they wanted to bring to the United States for either political reasons, reasons of control of money, or technological reasons. That's, for example, Ming-Wen Zhu of Huawei, who's been judicially kidnapped in Canada in an attempt to extradite to the United States because Huawei has technology that certain people in the United States want. After the World War in 1945, the great cultural artifacts, because of the horror of that World War, came into being. The United Nations, where relationships between states would be governed by laws, really important. And there was a forum wherein they could make discussion, and each would put forward their self-interest, and those self-interests could be negotiated and accommodated. Also came into being was in 1948 the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the chair of which was no less than Eleanor Roosevelt. Also came into being in 1958 were the Conventions of Asylum, where states agreed that those that are put upon and find succour or asylum would be given guarantees of passage and protection. It was ratified under the Australian authorship in the General Assembly in 1973. The Council of Europe came into being, which is solely concerns itself with the human rights, and human rights legislation is embedded in every nation in Europe that is a member of the Council of Europe. That's 44 nations. For some reason or other, in 2001, the United States Empire decided that those glorious cultural artifacts that were put together under the terrible experience of 80 million dead and most of the world destroyed in a world war, decided, for reasons we can't understand, they won't reveal, you can speculate on, that all of these artifacts of culture created in the 20th century had to be abandoned in the 21st century, and progressively they've done so. With the United Nations ruled by laws which allows nations to put their self-interests forward and negotiate a solution, they brought out something like what is called rules-based. You might remember Mad magazine from the 60s. It had a comic strip in it, monthly. I rule okay, you rule okay, no rules okay. It's sort of comic, sort of infantile. And so it goes. The great symbol, the icon of that tragedy, of abandoning these golden means, these wonderful artifacts of culture. The icon of that is the treatment of Julian Assange. Not one of the conventions of asylum was obeyed by the United Kingdom in the arbitrary detention of Julian Assange. Not one. And they're signatories. In fact, more than signatories, they're part of the authorship of the conventions on asylum. Not one. Procedural irregularities in Julian Assange's case are like a Niagara. They're just continuous. It's just a display of malice towards somebody who took seriously the great artifact of the United States' beginning, the First Amendment. He took it seriously and brought to us the knowledge of how to understand, how to measure, and how to ask our governments what they're doing in our name, and not only that, how to intelligently participate in the creation of policies that suit us and make getting on with our neighbouring states easier and fruitful. Anyway, I sort of come to the end now, but it's really important to keep in mind that ordinary things like the United Nations and the First Amendment, the Bill of Rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Council of Europe, they're gold, and hanging on to them to ensure that states hang on to those means is iconographically, when Julian's free, gives us an opportunity to understand that it's our strength that brought about Julian's freedom, and similarly it'll be our strength that insists that those wonderful artifacts of the 20th century continue, modified of course in the times, but continued on into the 21st century. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your reception, and we crack on.
So if we could give John and Gabriel a round of applause again, that would be absolutely awesome. What was the decision?
No extradition!
What was the decision?
No extradition!
So, my friends and I have set out on a journey that most people honestly don't even really realize that's happening, and that's the fight for Julian's freedom. It's carried me as far as to do a super awkward interview on Tucker Carlson. But I want to talk a little bit about the people that helped bring all of this together. The Courage Foundation is absolutely amazing. Their support of journalists internationally is second to none. Rebecca Vincent for all of the shortcomings of NGOs and their funders with Reporters Without Borders has been working tirelessly to demand Julian's freedom. We recently had a dissent whistleblower and accountability festival over in the United Kingdom, where they had, I think it was over 24 hours of guests and speakers and live whistleblowing taking place over in the UK. Names from someone as simple as people may recognize as Somerset Bean, all the way to the Daniel Ellsbergs and wow, my brain, and a bunch of other people in the world. John Pilcher, I apologize, gave a wonderful speech there. But there was also people whose names I don't recognize. There was a gentleman who simply was living in the United States post 9/11 that got targeted as a terrorist and had to flee the country. Stories like that are super impactful. Right now, though, this fight isn't just for Julian's freedom. He's not the only person in being prosecuted by the State Department for revealing factual and accurate information. My friends and I do a show that we call the Free Assange Vigil. Some may have seen it, some may have not. Every show we open with what we call the numbers. And it's going through the amount of days that have passed since significant events have happened in regards to whistleblowing and journalism. So let me get those pulled up here because I want to run them through here with you. Some of them are disturbing, some of them are hopeful, some of them just flat out don't make sense. So I'm going to read through these here. My numbers may not be completely accurate, but we try our absolute best to redo them about every 2 weeks just to make sure they're right. We have 3,839 days of illegal and arbitrary detention for Julian Assange. We have 802 days since the WikiLeaks founder was trafficked from the Ecuadorian embassy after being sold to the US and UK for a $4.2 billion loan to Lenin Moreno's Ecuadorian government. We have 165 days since Vanessa Breitzer's January 6, 2021 ruling denying Julian Assange bail and forcing him to stay in prison after citing fairness to the United States, which came 2 days after that judge personally wrote in her declaration, "I order the release of Julian Paul Assange."
Little Wayne,
right? We have we have at this point 1 day free almost for Reality Winner. I don't know if everyone knows who she is or what she does, but she was a whistleblower for the NSA that exposed the absolute incompetence of the intelligence community to the point that they couldn't even identify the source of an email. She has spent the last, 1,464 days in federal incarceration. But I am happy to announce, just as Gabriel did, that today is the first day that she is being moved to a halfway house in preparation for her November 3rd, 2021 release.
23rd.
November 23rd, 2021 release. We have 1,394 days of inhumane detention for the unproven alleged Vault 7 whistleblower Joshua Schultz. At least 973 of those days have been spent under special administrative measures. I don't know if everyone here is intimately aware of what special administrative measures are or the effects that they have on people, but it's these programs that are the explicit reason why the UK refused to extradite Julian. When you're placed under special administrative measures, it is because the Attorney or Assistant Attorney General of the United States made a ruling that says you communicating with absolutely anyone, including your family, is a direct threat to national security. You do not receive newspapers, you do not have color television, and you spend 23 hours a day confined in a cell. You get one 15-minute phone call once per month if the people that you are calling answer in the first time you attempt to call them. Those people have to be registered family members, and if you try to reach them on a phone number that is not registered, you can lose your privileges to make that one phone call next month. Joshua Schultz, after spending almost 1,000 days in special administrative measures, which to call solitary confinement is absolutely heinous because it's miles beyond what would qualify for solitary confinement. Joshua Schultz, someone gave an outline of a day in Joshua Schultz's life to a young man named Kevin Gostola of the Dissenter. And in it, Joshua Schultz mapped out how for almost a year now he's been trying to fight the special administrative measures ruling. How he's filed 17 or 18 different requests with the prison, ADX Florence, I believe, Manhattan Penitentiary, where Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself, is where he's currently being held. He has to spend 6 hours in a dog cage in the sun to meet with a loved one. That's not hyperbolic. That's not make-believe. The prison warden, whoever his lieutenant is, escorts him into a field inside of the prison where they place him inside of a 6x6 dog cage while they make sure his family isn't a threat to anyone in the prison. When they're done, Joshua Schultz is escorted back to that dog cage for 5 to 6 hours while the lieutenant lets his family members out. It's been reported that Joshua Schultz has had to urinate and defecate in a bag while waiting in this dog cage for someone to escort him back in. I don't know about anyone here, but I refuse to live in a country where that happens. I refuse to live in a country where someone like Joshua Schultz isn't even proven to be a whistleblower. Where Joshua Schultz is just someone that had access to a computer system where information was leaked from, and he is held up as an example for anyone else that may be in that situation. But I have good news for Joshua Schultz and Chelsea Manning, for Jeremy Hammond, for Commander X, and for everyone else that has struggled in this fight for human liberation. It's not over, right? Getting the no extradition ruling, Niels Melzer points out, is probably a boon to the US and the UK, because the individual states don't have to take responsibility for what's happening at this point. The UK can blame the US for the appeal, the US can blame the UK for keeping him in prison, and there's really no one to blame, according to them. Right, but I want to give everyone here a little bit of perspective. Chelsea Manning, almost 2 decades ago or a decade ago, was one of 100,000 people with access to that information. 1 in 100,000. Right. Fast forward a little bit, we have a gentleman by the name of Daniel Hale, a whistleblower from, I believe, the NSA. I could be wrong, that exposed the Obama-era drone program, where they were putting Americans on baseball cards, writing out their crimes on the back and flipping through the cards like a game, figuring out who they were going to drone strike. He was one of hundreds of people with that information. Joshua Schultz, whether it was him or not, was one of tens of people with access to Vault 7. One of tens. WikiLeaks and Julian boasted when that information was coming out that they have reached the very center of the CIA. That their ability to expose information is not bound by national security rule, and that those inside are fighting back. Julian actually called it one of the greatest acts of dissent to be a whistleblower, where before we would burn our draft cards, but now people are enlisting in the military specifically and only to be able to get into a position of authority where they can expose these crimes. Chelsea Manning was 1 in 100,000. Daniel Hale was 1 in hundreds. Joshua Schultz was one of maybe tens of people. Their day is numbered. They have nowhere left to hide. When 1 in 10 people with access to the most classified private server in the United States can release information that to this day is still relevant, to this day, we know that those tools are being used by groups like DarkSide, specifically targeting U.S. infrastructure, for whatever means they so choose. Right? This fight, while it may seem hopeless if we look at each individual moment, if you realize that that no extradition ruling was our flag on the beach of Normandy against the fascist bastards, the situation starts to change. Because no battle is won for fun. No battle is won without blood, sweat, and tears. But when we have 1 in tens of people willing to release thousands of documents, whether it was Joshua Schultz or not, those things must give us hope. Because there are still people fighting. All of us here recognize this threat that's standing against all of us. So I'm gonna have Misty come down and talk for a little bit now. I'll swap out because I'm kind of just rambling at this point. But again, if we can give a round of applause to John and Gabriel, I am beyond appreciative and excited for them to be here touring the United States. So thank you guys.
Hey guys! If you know me, you know I hate this part. Public speaking is not my jam. But I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you to John and Gabriel for coming. This is a really important moment for us in history. I say it all the time on our show that we've been doing for 2 years, that we're really at a crossroads in the United States of America. We're going to go one of two ways. And Julian Assange has been made the example. He's been made kind of the boiling point. And what WikiLeaks gives us is an invaluable service. It's not conjecture. It's not some overpaid head in a suit giving you his opinion. It's pristine, authenticated, verifiable source documentation exposing corruption and criminality of governments across the globe and corporations across the globe. That's an invaluable service to humanity. The things that they have exposed are some of the most heinous and vicious crimes that we've ever seen. And if that's what's been exposed, imagine what we don't know about. Where there's one rat, there's 100. That's really what we're looking at here. And so they're using Julian Assange as the example. They want to make an example out of him. It's not even about Julian. Yes, they want to shut him up. Yes, they want to make him go away. But this is about silencing all of us. All of us. You, me, all of us. This is coming for all of us. And he's just being used as the example to make everybody afraid to speak out against the U.S. empire, against Western empire. And we have to fight back against that. We're running out of time. If Julian Assange is allowed to be extradited, he's allowed to be brought to the United States, it's over. We can't, how do you come back from that? Once you lose, this is your First Amendment. This is not a game. This is your First Amendment. And once that's gone, it's gone. Think about how hard fought that was just to get it the first time. Do you really think we're going to be able to get it the second time? Because I don't. I don't. And so we're holding on to it by a thread. It is just barely there as it is. We have anti-protest laws across the country cropping up. Something like 30 of them have already passed. There are 70 on the books in states across the country. We have 4 right now in the state of Ohio that we have to fight against. And that is what they're coming for. They don't want dissent. They don't want you to speak out against them. They don't want their crimes exposed. They want to be able to do all of those things in silence and in the dark. And we cannot allow that to happen. Again, look at the things that have been exposed that we know that has happened. I don't want those kind of people to be able to do that under the cloak of darkness. They need to be exposed every day, all day. People in power should be terrified to step out of line. They should be afraid to do anything wrong. We should have complete privacy. They should have none. And it's backwards. It's backwards. They have complete privacy and you have none. They know what you eat. They know where you go to school. They know where your kids go to school, what store you shop at, what size shoe you wear. They know everything about you. And that needs to be flipped. We need to flip that immediately. People in power should have no privacy. None. Zero. Zip. You don't get any. Once you put yourself into a position of power, that's what you should be signing up for, period. And that's the fight. And I say this all the time. The fight for Julian's freedom, the fight for the First Amendment, the fight for free speech, that is the front line of every other fight that you want to fight. If you want health care, how are you going to get that? If you can't put out legitimate information, how are you going to do that? We already know there's a whistleblower, Wendell Porter, who worked for a health insurance lobbying company. His job was literally to write propaganda to confuse the American populace about the Canadian healthcare system. That was his job. That's what we're fighting against. If you want to fight for green energy, if you want to fight for literally anything, you cannot do that unless we win this fight right here today. We have to win it. There is no other way. If we don't, it's over. It really is. I don't mean to be like a Debbie Downer or a doomsdayer, but that's it. It really is done. So thank you guys, seriously, for coming out. I know it's hot and it's windy, but this is really one of the most important things. I know I can get a little worked up and overly dramatic about it. Maybe not, though, because fuck it. This is dramatic. This is dramatic. This is the fight. So, take me in all my drama and just let me tell you that this is an unbelievably important thing. And being here is a huge step. Taking this back to your communities where you live, to your neighbors, to talk to everybody. I talk to my hairdresser. Hi, Ethan. I talk to my hairdresser all the time about Julian Assange. I've made him an expert. He had no idea who Julian Assange was before I started talking to him about it. And that's how it is. In the United States, you either don't know who he is because mainstream media never covers him, or what you do know is wrong. And that's the fight. We have to get out there. We have to educate people. Once people are exposed to the truth, look at Nils Melzer. Nils Melzer bought into the bullshit. He bought into the propaganda. He didn't want to take a look at the Julian Assange case. But once he did what every normal thinking person does. He changed his mind. And that's what we have to do. We have to inform people, and we have to change people's minds. So thank you again to the Shiptons for coming all the way to Ohio. OH!
Ayo!
You're not letting me down there. I was a little nervous. So thank you guys for coming. Thanks to everybody for coming. I really appreciate all the work that everybody's doing in their communities. It's vital work. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me ramble. I appreciate it.
So we have another very special person here with us. Her name is Taylor Hudak. She is a dear friend of mine. She is someone that I met actually through the Anonymous Bites Back podcast over 2 years ago. She was a college student at Kent State at the time, covering Julian fervently, furiously, and with extreme dedication on Kent's news stations. Our efforts together, we started Action for Assange, along with one of our friends, Steve Poikinen, and a casualty of the information war, Christy Dolph. About 6 or so months into that journey, Misty joined us, and I could not be more appreciative of that. But Taylor actually stepped out of doing our live streams and into a legitimate career in journalism, which I am ecstatic for. She's a reporter with Activism Munich. I probably butchered it. Munich, one of the two. And she has helped to radicalize Germany. Most people don't really know it, and you can't really see it from here in the U.S. But Germany is one of the countries that has some of the most on the ground, some of the loudest support for Julian Assange. And I would, in no small part, thank Taylor for that and the work that she's done, traveling literally the world covering Julian's case. In February of 2020, she sent out by herself with no spending money, with a cell phone camera, and the hope of getting close to the court case to cover Julian's trial. 2 years later, she's interviewed almost anyone there is involved in this case to interview. She does wonderful reports every single week and has been able to educate almost the entire continent of Europe, or those willing to listen, about Julian's case. So without further ado, everybody, Taylor Hudak.
All right, Andrew, I want to thank you for that introduction, and I also want to thank the Shiptons for being here. John Shipton, it is good to see you again, and Gabriel, thank you for also being here, and a big thank you to Action for Assange for hosting this event. Woo! Excellent work they're doing. Live streams every single week for hours covering this case and speaking about the importance of this case. It's also something that obviously is very important to me, and I spent quite a bit of time covering it. And I want to begin, first of all, by reiterating a point that WikiLeaks editor-in-chief Christian Rafferson mentioned. This was on the day before the first part of the extradition hearings, and he said that whatever one's passion is or cause is, the outcome of this case will impact your ability to fight for what means so much to you, whether that be privacy rights, anti-surveillance, censorship, animal rights, gay rights, whatever your cause is. Julian Assange's situation, his fate is inherently tied to your fate as well. And if you're not an activist, if you're not a journalist, if you're just a member of the public who is concerned about how the United States engages with the rest of the world, and you're curious about politics, this case impacts your right to know. An attack on Julian Assange is an attack on all of us. Now, covering this case in London extensively, it is no secret that there has been numerous challenges to covering the case, whether NGO observers whose professional job it is to monitor these court proceedings and were unable to the journalists like myself who had some difficulty connecting to the video conference link. This is the most consequential press freedom case of our time. It is in the public interest to learn about these proceedings and hear about what's happening in this courtroom. We also must ask ourselves why this is happening. Why are we keeping this case in the dark? Why has the media largely remained silent? Unfortunately, because of groups like Action for Assange and other grassroots journalists, more and more people in the mainstream media, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, among other publications, are stepping up and they're speaking out and saying enough is enough. This is wrong. This is an attack on all journalists. So it's not just a fringe group of activists anymore. That is not at all the case. Every single major civil liberties organization in the United States and throughout the world is calling for Julian Assange to be freed and for this case to be dropped. The journalism that won Julian Assange numerous awards is the same journalism that has him in a prison today. He is in one of the worst prisons, if not the worst prison in England right now. And I want to reiterate right now, especially to the Biden administration, that each day that Julian Assange is sitting in Belmarsh prison, and each day that the United States, this country, continues to prosecute this case, is another day that the United States betrays its own constitution. How can we allow this? Does this make any sense? No, it doesn't, right? And lastly, at the end of the second half of the extradition proceedings, I spoke with Lori Love, who is one of the very few people who can understand what Julian Assange is going through as far as facing extradition to the United States. And Lori Love said something to me that was very profound. He said that oftentimes it is the process can be the punishment. This process is a punishment, and we're seeing that happen right now, especially with the judge's latest decision back earlier in winter where she denied his bail. Absolutely devastating decision, but one thing that we all have to remember is that, and I want to end off first of all with a message from Edward Snowden. I said this a few months ago, but I think it's really important to keep remembering this. And I think all of us here who are activists and journalists, especially independent journalists, know this, but we cannot rely on elected leaders to solve our problems. And while I am going to call upon the Biden administration to separate itself from Trump-era attacks on the free press by dropping this case and freeing Assange, we must all depend on each other as well. Because real change begins with me. It begins with all of you here. It begins with the organizers of this event. It begins with everyone who is fighting for this case and who cares about the future of the free press. Another thing too here is that this is not just a broader press issue or First Amendment issue. This is someone's life, and I think that's why it's important to have these events, to have Julian Assange's family here, so we know this is a real person who is being impacted by this. Niels Melzer, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, said that he has been subjected to torture for a decade. This is completely unacceptable, and the UK government, the US, Ecuador, and Sweden have not been held accountable for this. Julian Assange ought to be freed, and he also ought to be compensated for the horrific state crimes that have been leveled against him. If we constantly raise awareness and collectively act together like we are today, we can impact Julian Assange's tomorrow. We can save free speech and free press around the world, and we can save the life of Julian Assange. Thank you.
So there's four very special individuals in the back. They're with the Mid-Ohio Workers Association. And just so everyone knows, they are people that do tireless work, truly tireless, like make me feel like I don't do enough in the world. They are the people that go around and literally knock on doors to make sure the members of this community have access to utilities and pay their rent and can eat. So I would just like to encourage everyone to, as we wrap up, as everything kind of comes to an end, take a moment to talk with them. If you're a local or just someone nearby from the state or states surrounding, please feel free to talk with them about ways you can help. Because while we still struggle for Julian's freedom, there are people that still struggle to eat. And that's something that I think is super important to recognize. So I want to give them a thank you for turning out with us, and anyone that has even just the ability to shake a hand, that makes it really go over and tell them that thank you for all the work that they do. But we've had a lot of really hard, really deep, really scary conversations up to this point. So I want to tell a story about Julian's court trial that hopefully will make everybody laugh a little bit. It was September of 2020, the first Thursday of the second round of his trials. I think they were counting it as day 4 of the second round. And the prosecutors didn't show up. It was a quite contemporaneous situation, and I hope I used that word right. You had Claire Dobbins, who was the junior prosecutor, like the little league pitcher of UK criminal prosecutions, standing up on the bench. And then you had another gentleman who I wish I could remember his name. All I remember is that he goes by Mega Brain on his own website. Defines himself as Mega Brain. And if anyone remembers his name, please feel free to shout it out so I can tell the story a little bit better. But that individual was late for work. You are a U.S. prosecutor in literally the most dangerous court case, setting the most dangerous legal precedent, fighting one of the most solid laws of our country, of the UK and internationally, right? Edward Fitzgerald, I think his name was, if I remember that right. And Mr. Fitzgerald called in late and said, I left my laptop and my papers at court, and I wanted to work from home. And then another couple minutes later, you find out that he woke up in the wrong house. The head prosecutor for the United States, working on behalf of the United Kingdom to take all of our rights away, fell asleep in the wrong bed. And I don't know about you guys, but the only time I've woken up not knowing where I was is if I had a little too much fun the night before. So he calls in and he says, my laptop charger's there, all of my legal papers are sitting on my desk, but I had planned on doing everything from home today. Obvious lie, right? They're frantic, his laptop dies, and he's unable to connect to court. He calls in on another phone and says, hey, I'm still having trouble. I might be able to do it from this phone, but I don't know if I'll be able to. Like, I'm going to try, but this phone only has like 5% battery. I don't know if I can make it through the whole court proceeding. Right? So that hangs up. And then I can't remember his name either. We joked about it, calling him Johnny Bush League. The third string prosecutor for the United States was with Mr. Fitzgerald over in the wrong apartment. Drive that. Lewis. Yes, prosecutor. Yeah, Fitzgerald was the QC defending Julian. I apologize. Prosecutor Lewis.
Just stick with Mega Brain.
Mega Brain woke up in the wrong house, right? So after forgetting his laptop, forgetting his charger, not having his phone charged at all, leaving all of his privileged legal papers sitting on his desk in the courtroom, visible from the camera that the reporters were watching through, right? And in a frantic frenzy, court kind of gets delayed 15, 20 minutes, and we're all kind of just waiting. And then this second string hitter, Claire Dobbins, says, we have a problem. My husband, he's not feeling good. And I don't know about you, but if you're running late for work, the easiest thing to do is call off, because most jobs are better with a call off than showing up late, right? So Claire Dobbins, in her infinite wisdom, says, well, my husband's sick. He may or may not have symptoms that could or couldn't be coronavirus. And then court gets suspended. 3 weeks is when this all wraps up. The last week of the prosecution, or last week of the witness hearing, the U.S. said endlessly, the defense is taking too long. The defense is taking too long. The prosecution didn't even show up one day. We had witnesses, Noam Chomsky, Daniel Ellsberg. We had Andy Worthington. We had Khalid El-Masri, a gentleman tortured by the U.S. government as witnesses in this case. The prosecution brought 2 or 3 witnesses to the bench. They got laughed out of court. QC Lewis, the head prosecutor of the United States, got laughed out of court while questioning his own witness. Why? Because this man was such a bulldog that the person he had as a witness in another trial that credentials. Lewis sought this man's testimony in another case for extradition, but when it comes to being on the opposite side, apparently he is unqualified. Those trends were something that we saw throughout the entire 4-week witness hearing. We're months past that, almost a year now past that. We're 6 months past the judge saying that Julian should be freed and then citing fairness to the United States as to why he stays in Belmarsh prison. It's been 6 months since Julian's got to meet with his lawyers. If you get a goddamn traffic ticket, you can meet with your lawyers as much as you want in jail here in the United States. But when it comes to exposing the corruption in governments, they will go to any end to stop us. So I am grateful for everyone that turned out today, because we are all whistleblowers. Every single one of us here. We did not come here because it is in our best interests. We did not come here because we want to stand on concrete and sweat for 3 hours. We did not come here because it would be fun. We're here because there is a very real problem. I sent an email to every one of those motherfuckers that take our money and pretend to represent us, asking them to come here today to either speak or simply listen. I would like a show of hands. Who here works inside of this building that we're standing outside of right now? Look around. We have no political party left. We have no one that represents us left. We represent us. And it is about damn time that we stand up to take these streets back before they take us out of our homes. Because whether you're someone that's fighting for racial liberation, whether you're someone that's fighting for gun rights, whether you're someone that's fighting to expose corruption or to be able to attend a church gathering, all of those things fall under the First Amendment. There is not a single thing we do in our daily lives, including simply driving to the store, that isn't an expression of ourselves. Because we are facing a government that will tell us what we can eat, when we can eat, where we can work, what we can do, and when we can leave our homes. Here in Ohio, we have a certain level of privilege that other states don't. I have friends in California that aren't allowed to leave their house. I have friends in the United Kingdom that get chased by police officers for continuing the same protests that they've done for over 5 years. We are at a time of global turmoil, but the solutions are local. It's building systems where if you have a local whistleblower, the CIA can't come in and find them. It's getting city councils on board to build municipal broadband programs that can stop people from collecting your information. It's about demanding from social media companies and tech giants that our devices become the keys to their platform. So when the CIA, FBI, NSA, or whatever agency they wants to come and look at your information, they have to get a real fucking warrant to do it. Yeah. The fight to free Julian Assange is not just the fight for our liberties. It is the fight to end the Espionage Act. It is the fight to end the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. It is the fight to end the Patriot Act. Woo! All of these basic things that have been taken from us. So thank you for everyone that has turned out. Thank you for everyone acting. I actually have a really good friend here, Chris Mohan, stand-up comedian, political commentary, journalist. I actually met him in Columbus 4 years ago for the first time alongside Lee Camp and Tim Black at a stand-up show. So I'm super excited to pass the mic over to him.
Hello, everybody. And give it up for Andrew, guys. And for Misty and everybody from the Action for Assange crew. Thank you guys for coming out to this. As he said, my name is Krish Mohan. I'm a stand-up comedian. And I want to start by saying that after 2 decades of living in this country, at the end of 2019, I officially became a naturalized citizen of the United States. Thank you. I'm very excited to vote against my own interests. It's been a dream for every immigrant in this country. I have realized that in this country, though, a lot of people don't understand what their rights are, what the Constitution actually stands for, right? And I think one of the reasons is why we're here today is to fight for Julian Assange, is to be his voice when he has been ours for so long, right? I think a lot of people don't know what Julian has actually been going through. Before he was illegally imprisoned in Belmarsh prison, he was in the Ecuadorian embassy for 7 years. And a lot of the rhetoric that was surrounding that as well, he's freeloading at the Ecuadorian embassy. He's freeloading, you guys. Not being imprisoned in America. He's freeloading over there, which is ridiculous. And being in asylum shouldn't be a prison sentence with Wi-Fi. That shouldn't be the case, right? You should be celebrated for revealing war crimes. You should be celebrated for being a real journalist. But in America, that's not the case. They claim that he was freeloading. Well, I guess if that's the case, then the story of Rapunzel is just about a hot lady that's been freeloading off her parents, giving her a free tower and socialized haircuts, right? Or maybe the prisoners over at Guantanamo Bay are just freeloading, suckling at the teat of the freedoms of the American courtship program. That's probably what they're doing, right? I think it's important to know what Julian Assange really revealed about America. I think the most famous thing that he revealed was the collateral murder video, right? I think a lot of us here have seen it. If you haven't, it is proof that the American military killed Iraqi civilians and 2 Reuters journalists indiscriminately. Yeah, making jokes along the way. Yeah, I think that pretty much proves that the policy that America has on the First Amendment is shoot the messenger. Quite literally, that is the policy that we have in America. I don't think Americans really understand what journalism is. We have a very odd relationship with journalism in this country, right? To most Americans, I think journalism is 2 pundits on the opposite side of the screen screaming at each other about, I don't know, whatever topic you want to choose, and Tucker Carlson desperately trying to gain control of his show again and hoping nobody drops the N-bomb, right? Like, fingers crossed. It's either that or they scream about Russia for about 3.5 hours, day in and day out, and that's what American journalism is supposed to be. But it's not. Real journalism, true journalism, is about fighting back against power. It's about telling the truth, about holding people in a position of power far more accountable than corporate journalism ever would. And that's what Julian Assange did. The collateral murder video is proof of that. And where does that put him? That puts him in prison. Not one person from the collateral murder video is in prison. One of the other things that he revealed was about Vault 7. The Vault 7 leaks pretty much revealed that the CIA is spying on us using smart technology, phones, cars, televisions, which means that Mike Pompeo, the former director of the CIA and America's deadliest Care Bear, that's what he looks like. That means that the CIA and Mike Pompeo pretty much watched everybody here masturbate. That's what that means. And don't pretend like people here don't use their phones to masturbate. We are in front of the state capitol. There is someone in there masturbating on their phone right now. There might be some of us out here doing that too. I would like to say that's the cost of freedom, because sometimes that happens. That's what that means, man. See, I do love, but again, for revealing Vault 7, Julian Assange is in prison. Meanwhile, Mike Pompeo gets to live free, terrorizing the Smurfs and pretty much everybody that's vaguely brown. That's his job. He gets to continue doing that. Pompeo has called Julian Assange and WikiLeaks a hostile, non-state intelligence service. That's what Mike Pompeo referred to Julian Assange as, a hostile, non-state intelligence service, which is an epic slam, isn't it? he took Julian Assange's state away from him. We don't know. Is he solid? Is he liquid? Is he gaseous? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. But it's okay, because I think Julian Assange doesn't need a state. He has transcended a state, because the truth doesn't need a state. It just is, right? It just stays for what it is. I think it's important that we're all here today to fight for Julian. That's a very important thing to do. We have to become his voice, because he has been our voice for so long, right? I think we have a very odd relationship with the press in this country. We really do. We don't understand what that freedom actually is. But most of our media is controlled by the state. A lot of the corporate media is controlled by the state. That's really what corporate media is, right? And when you look at the rhetoric surrounding that, the freedom of the press is for everybody that publishes anything, right? It's for me, it's for you, it's for actual journalists out there doing a job, revealing the truth about how corrupt our system actually is. It's not for these, quote, good journalists. And the system considers people like Brian Williams and Rachel Maddow and Wolf Blitzer good journalists.
He got shot up in Iraq.
Yeah, right. Yeah. We watched Brian Williams have an orgasm over missiles exploding on national television, right? Rachel Maddow pretty much spent 3 years spreading a conspiracy theory of Russiagate nonstop, right? Wolf Blitzer is more concerned with his beard than about journalism. These are not good journalists. These are, at best, corporate propagandists. At worst, they're CIA assets is what they are. Yeah. Good freedom of press is for everybody that publishes anything, and that's what Julian Assange is. He's a publisher and a journalist. He revealed some of the most horrific crimes that the elites have committed against us, right? And I'm glad that you guys are here fighting for Assange to be free, because he really should be. Right now, Julian Assange is still stuck in Belmarsh prison because the United States and the UK are having a pissing contest as to who can be the world's best authoritarian government. So that's a fun contest to be a part of in our current state. Yeah, it's ridiculous, man. We all have the right for freedom of the press. The CIA, who we've talked about a little bit, their motto, according to Mike Pompeo, is to lie, cheat, and steal. And that's exactly what they're doing right now by keeping Julian Assange in prison. They have the freedom to lie to us nonstop, to steal our freedoms away, and cheat us out of our best way of life. So I'm really glad that you guys are here. Thank you for fighting for Assange, and hopefully at the end of this, we'll have a free Assange so he can go home and be with his family. Thank you guys very much. Yeah.
So that mostly concludes our speakers for today. I'll say a little bit, but I think I've talked enough. Thank you. Thank you for Gabriel. Thank you for John. Thank you for Misty, for Taylor, for Krish. Thank you for everyone that came out.
Thank you, Julian.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you for everyone that shared this on social media. We have Libertarians and Green Party members represented here today.
Billboard.
This
Billboard.
Thank you, Billboard.
It'll change in a minute. There's a
This
billboard.
fight does not have a slant. There's no leftism or rightism here. There's no Democrat, Republican, socialist, capitalist, anything. Right. It is right or wrong. This is the start of the battle of good versus evil. This is the St. Patrick's Battalion of the United States, standing up for free peoples that are being imprisoned around the world. A lot of the things that we talk about as activists, we don't even realize that WikiLeaks helped us expose. We wouldn't know about the war in Yemen if it hadn't been for WikiLeaks. Just flat out, we weren't in Yemen if it wasn't for WikiLeaks. Right? We wouldn't have known about the largest chemical spill in world history off the coast of Africa if it wasn't for WikiLeaks. We wouldn't know what was happening inside of the Democratic Party in 2016 if it hadn't been for WikiLeaks. Right? So as we leave here and depart, just remember to ask yourself, whenever a global situation happens, right? Whenever there's something that the mainstream media is trying to tell you is real, what would WikiLeaks show? Who would WikiLeaks reveal as the people behind the scenes manipulating the strings of power? Right? Because the one thing that we are at now is having the Democrats realize that Democrats rig elections, and now Republicans realize that Republicans rig elections, or that Democrats rig elections. If you were someone that was involved in the Ron Paul era of conservative organizing, you understand that Republicans rig elections, right? We don't have anything that resembles what we're told we have in this country. We do not have democracy. We do not have a free press. We do not have the ability to expose and hold accountable people that commit crimes against humanity. People starving nations, killing innocents and claiming that they're enemy combatants still walk free, still go on primetime television, while the person that sacrificed literally his life, everything for the last decade, if not longer, is in jail for that. There was a young woman, Chelsea Manning, who spent, at this point, her entire adult life in and out of prison. In 2020, she was finally released, hopefully for good, after a suicide attempt. Because of how heinous ADX Florence is, how heinous the Eastern District of Virginia and the Manhattan prison systems are. So I don't agree with the ruling by the UK in Julian's court case, because the United States does not have international jurisdiction over press. The United States does not get to make a determination of who and who isn't a journalist. Right? But the biggest thing is that the United States doesn't get to do this uncontested. They have a bunch of rowdy free people that will go down swinging saying this is wrong. Right? So I've personally taken it upon myself that if they're going to drag me out of my house for knowing factual and accurate information and sharing it on social media, I'll make myself available. I'll show up in the streets. I'll put myself on camera in the same room every day in a small warehouse in Cleveland, because I'm not going down without a fight. And if it ends up that any single one of us get put into prison for revealing factual and accurate information, it means we're winning, because we are the little guys. The fact that we are here today means that the empire has no clothes. It means that it is collapsing around us at a monumental rate that we probably can't even fathom. So as the free-thinking people of the world, what we have to prepare for is what comes next. There was a woman by the name of Susie Dawson who very early on encouraged me to do what I'm doing now. But the question she always had whenever we were talking about organizing was, what will you do once Julian is free? Right? So that question kind of turned into like a philosophical sort of thing. Because you hear this idea of the chilling effect all the way back to the prosecution of Daniel Ellsberg, how going after a whistleblower or a source or a journalist makes others scared to do the same thing. But I would like to leave everyone with this notion today of the boiling effect, right? Because the U.S. is not going to win this court case, even if it takes a decade to get Julian free. They will not win. And what will our world be when the Mike Pompeos, John Boltons, and Merrick Garlands of the world are forced to admit that you can expose classified information and you can expose criminals? Because the next step after that is accountability, and we are almost there. So please do not leave today with your heads hung low. Please know that just by showing up, just by making a scene for these people inside of this larger-than-life building, you are making a difference. Because every time we organize, every time we have a conversation with someone about this, we change the world. There's a little thingy over there, a little monument on the other side of the park that I'd like everyone to look at. And it says, if you save one life, you have saved the world. So I just want everyone to kind of reflect on that, because that's what we're fighting to do. It may be one man that has brought us all here together today, but it is the ideas that he stood for for why it is important. So I would just like to again thank everyone, and if we can give the Shiftons one more round of applause, that would be amazing.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
So,
All right, we wrapping up, Misty?
if we could,
Do you want me to try to get some interviews?
You can,
Get a
yeah.
group picture together
Okay.
for the tour. I don't know if you want to stand just right up here in front of
Oh,
the
he's
camera.
doing a picture real quick. We can wrap it if you want. I can just film interviews and then we can put them up later.
Yeah, let's do that because I can fix the audio.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. I'll just film some interviews and then I'll just put them up later.
All right, cool. Good.
Okay.
I'll hit you up after to have you
Okay,
upload
cool.
the shit.
Okay. Thanks, Sleepy.
Thanks for coming, y'all.
Huh?
I was just telling the audience, thanks for coming, everybody.
Oh yeah. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll have interviews up later if I can. I'm gonna grab some with some of these people here, and so hopefully we'll have some interviews up that we can. I'll put on the Action for Assange page and on Facts on the Ground and whoever else wants them. So yeah, thanks everybody. We'll see you later.